Um, Ringer. Hey, morning or good day, or wherever you may be. Yeah, I saw that it went down. It does that, unfortunately. Thank you for letting me know. So I appreciate it. How's your uh, how's your day going? It's actually when I take my kids out and I'm around other people's kids, especially younger kids, I really try to remember that a lot of times bad behavior in kids is due to their parents and not to them. I've had a lot of experiences with helping raise other people's kids. Like I worked in a group home for a while, and I definitely learned that if you if you are a active parent and you discipline and you ask for respect, kids are more respectful. So it says it's evening time here around 7 p.m. I didn't know it's called 17 p.m. in the USA. I don't do the 24-hour format. Oh, it would be 19 o'clock. But we don't, a lot of in the US, we don't do a 24-hour format. The only people that usually do the 24 hours in the US is the military. So if you hear someone saying like, 1900 instead of 7 p.m., it's a good indication that they are in the military, or at least they want to be perceived as having been in the military. But yeah, we don't. Most of us don't use a 24-hour clock. That's more of a military thing. So, military. I watched too much Hollywood's. I got confused. Hey, I we all. It's it's amazing how much movies influence us and our perception of everything. But definitely, uh, Hollywood takes a lot of liberties. Yeah, I'm curious about phone message rollers or massage rollers. Do they actually work? If so, what's your experience with them, and how often you use them, and what are the benefits of using them? Um, I I'm horrible at self care, so I have a foam massage roller. I have one of the and when I use it, it's fine. It's good. I think it it's supposed to help. I'm just horrible at taking care of myself. So I've known a lot of like I had an old coach that was a huge fan of it. Everyone that I know, I've never had someone that uses them regularly that says anything bad about them. People really like them. Um, so I'm horrible at it. I'm horrible at stretching. I'm horrible at taking time to cool down. I'm horrible at you know getting massages or massaging myself. It's um, but when I do use it, it does feel good, and I think it's probably a good idea, especially if you're sore in a particular area. There's one that I like a little bit more than a foam roller too. It's I don't know what to call it, but typically it's about a plastic piece that's yay long, and it's got different like balls are on it, and usually it's like a harder plastic or a harder rubber, and it's they're individual little rollers that you roll on your calf. And I really like that. I feel like that really helps the calf, or you can get somebody you can roll it on your hips and stuff. That helps because you can apply pressure. And if you have a spouse or someone that you live with that can help you with that, it's good. Oh, it's fine, man. Maria says, I'm sorry for interrupting earlier. You were talking about teaching kids about respect, but I didn't quite catch what you said. Just talking about like when I take my kids out, like take my kids to the park, or I take my kids to a museum or any place where they're playing and interacting with other people's kids. It's frustrating sometimes because kids don't know how to be respectful, or they're not good at sharing, or they're very pushy. And a lot of times, parents that won't actively engage with their kids. They're not like telling their kids to stop it, or if they're saying stop it, they'll say like, "Oh, stop it!" like from far away. Don't do that. And that's very frustrating because that's not how kids learn. Like you need to actively engage with them and get them to stop. You need to, you know, don't wait. And it's very frustrating when other parents don't do that. So, and a child will be respectful if you teach them respect. If you insist upon being respectful, and it doesn't even have to require that you know, it's not even about like spanking or using physical discipline to get them to be respectful. I've had plenty of kids that were disrespectful to their parents. Like when I used to work with a youth group, that I would just tell them, hey, you're not allowed to talk to me that way. You can talk to your parents that way. If your parents don't have a problem with you being disrespectful, but you're just not going to talk to me that way. And for whatever reason, they would do better with me. They'd be more respectful. Rieger says, I've noticed Western parents are really skilled at raising their kids. Their parent method seems more advanced than what Eastern parents typically use. We get beaten up for nothing, and it's not even funny. Yeah, I would have to know like what country like you live in, and I think that sometimes when you have a lot of resources, it's in India, yeah. So when like in the U.S., we're very blessed with resources. I'm gonna try to say this quickly. We're very blessed with resources. We have an abundance of resources, and even if you're poor, you're gonna be okay. Even because there's government programs that are gonna take care of you. It's not gonna be as devastating as in other countries being poor. You're not gonna your likelihood of actually starving to death in the U.S. is not very good. So I think that we have less pressures to succeed because failing doesn't have such a high cost. Versus in India, there's a high cost to failing. If you fail, like it can be death. And I think that that makes it harder for parents to relax from hitting their kids. If your kid is going to succeed or die, I think there's a lot more pressure on, hey, like whatever it takes. If I have to beat my kid for them to be successful, I'm gonna hit my kid because I don't want them to die. Do you believe there's a correlation between having resources and being wealthy with good parenting skills? I never saw that perspective. Ah, true. I think that I don't think it has to be that way, but I think if you are, it's like this. If your kid wakes up in the morning and is supposed to go to school, but your kid's like, oh, I'm too tired, I'm not getting out of bed, and they're like going slowly. If the idea is like, okay, if they don't miss class, nothing bad's gonna happen, so you're less likely to hit them. But let's say you're living in a rural community, and that child, it's their job is to help with the harvest. Their job is to help with the crops. Their job is to help the family. Like they actually have a job, and that job is essential to the family succeeding. When that kid is like, "Oh, I'm not getting out of bed," it's like, "Hey, no, you don't have a choice, dude. You're getting out of bed, because if you don't get out of bed and you don't go to work, our family will starve. Our family will have problems. So I think in that situation, you're more likely to hit that child and be like, get out of bed, get to work. We're not playing this game. But what I think happens is that, let's say you have one generation that's that way. Well, the next generation, they might not have it as bad, so they may not need their kid to go work in a field or do something. But because they were raised by a generation where that was essential, when they discipline their kids, they think you got to hit them, and that's what goes through, is hitting your kids, and it's something that's hard, I think, for people to get away from. Do you believe it's a major factor? That's what you're saying. I think so. I think it can be when you're facing starvation and you're facing difficulty. I I think that is a factor. I think it can be. It doesn't have to be. Like you can move past it, but I think it's really hard. And I also think it's harder depending on how hard the parent works. If you're a parent, if both parents in the household are working and they work extremely hard, and they come home at the end of the night and they're trying to get their kids to do their homework or trying to get their kids to do the right thing, they may be emotionally, mentally, physically exhausted. And the idea of arguing with a kid or trying to get something through a child when they're exhausted can be difficult. And so they may rely on giving the kid a hit. Given your current authoritarian government and limited job opportunities, I suppose what you're saying is true. I'll just let my mom hit me every day with a smile. Then that's. I'm not saying that that's idealistic. I'm not saying that that's like an excuse. Um, I think it's something that unfortunately, like, JK, good. That's it's very funny. Um, I think there's like a side where you have to give you have to be understanding for your parents. Like, my parents were heavy-handed disciplinarians with me. My parents were both. Um, my dad was raised by my grandpa, who was a Marine. My parents were Marines. My mom was a Marine. So both my parents served in the military. My mom's mother and family was very abusive, and my mom and dad worked very hard to not be so with us, but they were heavy-handed, but they were better than their parents were. So and my grandfather, his dad, my great grandfather, wasn't around for a large chunk of his childhood, so he missed that upbringing. And my great grandfather, he was kicked out of his house when he was 7 years old to go get a job. He was told, "Hey, you got hair on your legs. You're a man. Go to work." So my great grandfather didn't really have a long extended childhood either. So I I look back and I say, hey, like, nobody really knew what they were doing, and now I have less of an excuse, so I have to do a good job with my kids and being conscientious of that. But I think I give there's a point where you gotta look back and be like, yeah, they didn't know what they were doing. So, but have you ever hit your children or gotten hit by yours? No, I don't hit my kids. I think I think if you're angry with your children, I don't think hitting. I think there's a difference between hitting and spanking, but I think that you need to really put a lot of thought into it if you're going to do it, and the right circumstances and when that happens. And it should be not lightly done. Thank you for the follows. Is your society still patriarchal, or has it become more equal, or perhaps the other way around? Because it's so patriarchal here, you have no idea. Um, I think our society is mixed. Um, I would say that there's families that have a matriarch. There's families that have a patriarch. I think unfortunately, in striving for equality, there are a lot of families in the U.S. that don't have a leader. The husband refuses to lead. The mother refuses to lead properly. Like no one takes a firm hand. Um, so, but we are a more patriarchal society. Um, and some like it's hard. It's hard too because the U.S. is so wide. I live in California, so you do have a lot of people that are not being effective leaders in their parents or in their parenting. So that happens. Um, and I think the idea of like like what's better, matriarch or patriarch, or that kind of headbutting. I think that there should be some give and take. Like if, with my wife, um, I chose to marry a smart, capable woman, and I married her because I know that I am fallible. I know I can make mistakes, and I know I can be very stubborn and very hard headed, and that would be a detriment to me in a lot of situations. My wife is very smart. She's very good at a lot of things that I'm not. So together we are better, and I listen to what she has to say, and she'll listen to what I have to say, and there's a give and take. And I think that's what's important. I think you know you should work together. I believe in the biblical principle that when two people get married, they become one, and I think that's how it should happen. Is that the two people should be interlocked and should be reliant upon each other. Yeah, California is expensive. It's very, very expensive here. Growing up, I always thought divorce was taboo. Um, but as I got older, I realized how important it is to have that option. Do you typically arrange marriages when parents choose your partner, or do you pursue relationships, marry on your own? What's the dominant culture regarding marriage here? Um, typically, People pick their own spouses here. Um, so people will date and they'll find somebody that they want to be with. And I mean, I think it's good. I don't think that there's a problem with your parents helping you find a partner. I think, again, if your parents love you and you have good parents and they're wise, they're going to help you find a better partner. If you're, it's very easy when you're young. Like here, like I almost got married once before my wife, and that would have been a huge mistake. I was 22 and was kind of rushing into it, and it would have been a very bad idea. It would have been a bad marriage. So thankfully, that didn't work out. And my parents would have, had they had the option, would have blocked that from happening. Um, so I don't think that taking your parents' advice, if you have parents that know you and parents that have your best interest at heart, I don't think that's the worst thing. Um, I think in American society, we tend to be very rushed into saying like, oh, like arranged marriages are horrible. But I think arranged marriages can work. I think there can be love in arranged marriages. Um, it's just you have to trust your parents, and your parents have to be really interested in finding you the best mate. So we're gonna ask what happened. We're just not. We weren't like. I think the biggest thing that happened is we were not compatible with each other, and and that's fine. It's fine for two people to almost get married and realize like, nope, this is not going to work out. So I was very very fortunate and very blessed that both of us in our own ways saw that, hey, this is not good. So then moved on. Okay, I've never been a case of a dowry in Western culture and modern day marriage. Has there ever been a case of dowry in Western culture and modern day marriage? Not prevalent. If there is, it's not really talked about. But we have, um, we still have alimony if you get divorced. Divorce can be very expensive. You still will have to pay child support if you get divorced. Like there's a lot of legal things that take the place of a dowry. Um, so like people have this idea that, oh, the dowry doesn't exist, but it does. It just doesn't. It's more in contracts of what that person gets versus you know anything else. So it does exist in its own way. You just like it when people from other countries come to live there and take jobs. They could have invited to locals, potentially leaving them unemployed and increasing competition. Um, I don't have a problem with immigration. I think if you want to come here and work, awesome. I think I don't like when employers take advantage of people that immigrate to the US as a cheap labor force. And whether someone's taking someone's job, it's not the it's not the taking of the job that sometimes is frustrating, it's the driving down of wages. So, and one of the problems like a lot of people don't see about illegal immigration is that um, illegal migrants get taken advantage of, and it's very unfortunate. They get preyed on by gangs and cartels and mobs, um, but they also get taken advantage of by employers. And I've worked with people of various immigration status, and I've watched employers take advantage of people that didn't know their rights or couldn't go argue for their rights. And it's very frustrating when you work with someone that's not documented and the employer lies to them when they get hurt on the job. You like there have been situations like if I wasn't there and other people weren't on the job that would insist that that person get taken care of, the employer would just blow them off and they'd be hurt by themselves. And that's unfortunate. And that's what happens when things aren't done properly is people get taken advantage of. And that's not even the worst. Like there's been numerous like there used to be this big practice where they would bring up laborers from Mexico illegally and or from other parts of South America or other parts of the world, and they would say, okay, like we're gonna pay you at the end of the harvest. So go harvest all the crops. We'll give you like a stipend, like a little bit of money, but your big paycheck's gonna come when the job's done. So these guys would go out and they would work the fields and they would work hard. They'd be out there all summer, or not summer, but during the heat of harvest, do a great job. And then when they would go to collect their checks, the owner of the field would call immigrations, and immigration would be there to arrest them and take them back to Mexico. And so the owner would get away without paying his workers, and that happens a lot in various ways in the U.S. Unfortunately, so that's the downside of illegal immigration. And there's you get taken advantage of a lot, and it's very unfortunate. But yeah, like the idea of a cheap labor force is very frustrating. Oh yeah, I heard there's been an increase in legal migrants coming under Biden's administration, and that hasn't been resolved yet. I think it's unfair for people who immigrate legally. Yeah, it is unfair for people that follow the rules. You know, I'll never blame someone for wanting to make a better life for themselves. I think if someone if you come to the United States and you want to work hard and you're just tired of the bad situation in your country, I'm very sympathetic. You know, you know, um, but I think if you're not coming here, if you're coming here for nefarious reasons, like you want to take advantage of the system, then I'm not for that. But if you're a hard worker, every country needs hard workers. You can never have enough people that want to work hard. That's how this country was built. Um, All right, what's up, Bowser? Thank you. Why do Americans barbecue so much? Is there a regional dish you're really proud of? Um, we barbecue so much. It's that's also regional. Let me see. I've seen many videos emphasizing how important individualism is in the U.S. and Western countries. People there don't seem to fear the police. They ask for badge numbers and names, and this always surprises me. Um, that's like yes, people can ask for badges and names and stuff. Just keep in mind that a lot of what you see in our movies is not true. A lot of what gets posted to social media is not true. Um, People are kind of people everywhere, and someone may feel very empowered to ask the police for their badge numbers, and they may be very empowered to be like, you know, very strong with the police. But that's not always the case. And sometimes it's because the police aren't the real police in that neighborhood. Because I doubt the same guy that's telling somebody, hey, I want your badge number, that they're also so aggressive with the gangbanger that is making them do something. Like, so they may be feel empowered to go tell the police or go talk to the police that way, but that's because they're not the real authority. The real authority will be, the local gang. So, um, like a gangster. Like, so a person will go up to a cop and be like, I want your badge number. It's because they know the police officer's not going to do anything, probably, to them. And you have that right. But that same person is not necessarily going to, go up to some gangster that's, selling drugs or being rude or trying to intimidate them. They're not going to be like, I want your name and your, I want your ID number, or I'm going to report you to the police. They're going to probably not do that because they know they'll get hit. So, and it's good to be able to ask police for their information, but it's not what I understand for sure. But and I get that it's different. Like, I lived in China for a couple of years, and there it's very different towards the police. Like, the police rule, and you absolutely would not harass a police officer in China. That'd be the last thing you'd want to do. Um, China, come to India. You dare to call them even hey, and not so welcoming tone, they will throw you in jail or arrest you for sure. Yeah. And then the U.S. Um, you gotta remember the United States is big, and local customs and local law enforcement dictates a lot of what can happen. And you know, you may be in like California or New York or some city, and you might think, you get pulled over by the police, and you can be like, I want your badge number, I want your name. But you get to some rural county, and that sheriff pulls you over and pulls you out of your car, he may curb stomp you with impunity. You know, you it's not all the same across the board. And you may think that, hey, I told this local police officer what's up. Like, I was disrespectful to a cop and I got away with it, and I demanded his badge number, and man, I'm awesome. But let's say whatever it is you did, you end up in jail. You're like, I want your badge number. It's gonna go really, not gonna go really far, because when you're in prison or jail, the police talk to the guards, and the guards talk to the other inmates, and you may get beat up because you were disrespectful to a cop once you're on the inside. I mean, they won't do to white people because of their colonial hangover is still here, but local people are shit scared. Is a sheriff and a cop the same thing? No, sheriffs and cops aren't the same thing. So like you have, the sheriff is usually a voted in position in a county, and depending on what state you live in, what your local county regulations are, a sheriff can be appointed too, I think, by a judge in some counties. Police are usually work for a city, and they operate within city limits, and they are appointed typically by the mayor. They're not elected. So sheriffs and police are different things, and they operate. Usually, sheriffs are, you're more likely to find them in a rural area, but like in LA, I think the sheriff department covers like parts of LA. So, a sheriff may be beholden to the people that elect him, but if you live in like a rural community, let's say you live where there's a lot of farms and a lot of ranches, or a lot of places where you have a high immigrant population of people that are illegal or undocumented, or people that don't vote, a sheriff can have a lot more power and be more oppressive, because the people that vote for him elect him, but the majority of the people don't in that area don't have a right to vote, so they don't get any say. So the sheriff and his deputies can treat them however they want with impunity. So that's a difference. Versus a police is going to have to answer to the mayor, and the mayor is going to be voted on. But at the same side, if you have a huge immigrant population that can't vote for the mayor, they have no control, and the police isn't going to be as beholden to them unless there's a federal investigation, like if the FBI or gets involved, or if the state like DA gets involved in the investigation, then there's some chances for some help. No, police officers and sheriff's deputies and sheriffs aren't the same. So you call your state a county, then what do you call a district? It's like a province. I think you can call it county when we call it a district here. So let's take California. California is the state. The state is broken up into counties. So there's like LA County, Orange County, Riverside County, and those all have different territory. Within a county can be a city, but the city buys land from the county. The city buys land from the county and operates within the county, but has its own rules inside that city that they can dictate. And the county has its own rules that it can dictate. So you go state, county, city, or towns, because there's cities and there's towns. And then some towns will be not big enough, so they'll be under the county's jurisdiction, and they won't actually be an incorporated city. So city governments are in some ways beholden to county regulations in the county government. And the county government is beholden to the state government, and the state government is beholden to the federal government to a degree, because the federal government doesn't have complete say so about what happens in your state. So that's why, like, you have police departments, you have sheriff departments, and then the federal government has the FBI, they have the Drug Enforcement Agency, they have the Marshals Service, which the Marshals run like the prisons and stuff. And they investigate some crimes. So we have different levels of police. That's why in California, you can get pulled over by a police officer, and a police officer may find drugs in your car and not do anything about it. But you get pulled over by a sheriff's officer, and if the county rules are different, the sheriff's officer can arrest you for that same offense. And then the sheriff may not arrest you, but if an FBI agent or a drug enforcement officer pulls you over, they may arrest you for that offense. So there's like different layers. That's why it's good to be on good standing with your local police, your local sheriff, and your local FBI. So sheriff has more power than the cop, and the FBI agent has more power than the sheriff. Not exactly, because there are situations where a sheriff can tell an FBI, like, you don't have any jurisdiction here, like, get out, you know, and the FBI technically has to listen. The problem is, though, so states and local governments take money from the federal government, and the federal government may tell them, hey, if you don't listen to the FBI, we're going to cut off your financial resources. We're not going to give you any money. So the local government will listen to the FBI, because if they don't, they won't get federal grants and federal money. So technically, the FBI doesn't have authority, but they can, if the local government's not willing to stand up and argue with the FBI. In the United States, your rights are only take you as far as you're willing to have that fight. If you're not willing to have that fight and argue and risk everything, your rights are gone. Your rights will be evaporated. If you're willing to fight and argue and stand your ground, there's a lot of things that can support you with your rights. You got the FBI, we have the CBI, which is useless. Yeah, it's hard, man. Like, the hard thing about the FBI in the United States is we have very good people that work for the FBI, and they're honest and they do things and they save lives. They save kids, because the FBI does a lot of the investigations for children, and they help keep local police honest and stuff. And then you have corrupt FBI, you know, and that's the unfortunate side of how it works. I just watched Killers of Flower Moon and learned that the FBI was initially a private organization when it began investigating the deaths of Native Americans. Ours do neither. Not that, what you said about the FBI. Yeah, it's hard, man. I mean, you have very good police officers out there, and I think the majority of police where I live, do a good job and they're honest. But I've learned that, when that what's true from where I live is not necessarily true for the person that lives in the next city over. And every city changes in the US. So you may go someplace where the police are great, and you may go someplace where the police are horrible. You may deal with a good FBI agent, and you may deal with a corrupt FBI agent. Just people are people wherever you go. And in every agency, every, government, you have people of different character. For instance, I've dealt a lot with criminals and gangsters and you know bad people, but I know a lot of good gangsters. I've known a lot of good criminals, and they might do different things that are wrong, and they might be not always the best, but I know that they're not going to do anything to me, and I know that if I actually needed help, that they may help me, you know, and if I needed something, that they would, and I know that like if I'm respectful to them, and I'm not talking about like groveling, just if I just pay like normal levels of respect that I do anyone else, most gangsters are never going to bother me, you know, because they're not bad people. They're just they're gangsters. They're not necessarily bad people. They operate in a different world than I do, but as long as there's mutual respect, everything's fine. Same thing with police. You know, you have good bad guys and you have bad good guys. Have you traveled to any country other than China? What took you to China, and what were you doing there? I traveled to Mexico a little bit, but I lived in China. My parents were missionaries there, so I lived in China from the time I was 16 to just before I turned 18, so almost 2 years. And I traveled a lot in China, and China is very different. China's like the U.S. Like it has a lot of different cultures within it, and it's hard to say. You know, like if you go to Beijing, the religious rule or the anti-religious rules are very tough. If you go farther away from Beijing, there's more religious freedom. If you are in Beijing, there's laws that are very strictly enforced that aren't enforced in other parts of the country. So I would like to see. There's parts of India I'd like to see. I've known a lot of Indians where I've lived. There's a lot of Indians. A lot of local businesses are owned by Indians, um, or people from Nepal. I know there's a difference. I know India is not Nepal, but I'm saying there's a lot of people from southern Asia here, Southeast Asia. um. So wait, missionaries in China is that country opposed to every other religion? Yeah, yes they are. You have to if you are teaching Christianity in China and you're a foreigner, you have to do it secretly. You don't you don't openly tell everyone what you're doing, and it can be it can be dangerous. See, I've heard that Indians living abroad are very frugal with money. Minji, because USA has a prevalent tipping culture. That's what I've heard about it. Yeah, I don't know, man. I tend to talk to business owners. Like if I go to the same store all the time, like local stores, whoever works there and stuff, I talk to. But a lot of the Indians and people from Nepal, they I don't know how they spend their money. They invest a lot in their businesses, and I think too they invest in their kids' education is a big thing. So, um, but they tend like it's they still can be kind of private with how they do things, and we're such a big we have so many different people and people groups that cultures sometimes kind of keep to their own to some extent. And if you're in a lot of times if you're from a different country and you're in the US and your interest is in preserving your culture, you tend not to mix too much. But see, I will not be offended. I promise. So yeah, so how what when I talk to a lot of Indians that own stores, but how they spend money in their personal lives, I don't know. Um, couldn't tell you. I know that the U.S. or I know that a lot of us in the U.S. tend to be um, a lot of people don't understand Indians and Indian culture in the US. And there is a lot of disrespect towards Indians in the United States. And a lot of times it's not like flagrant disrespect, but like have you ever seen there's the show called The Simpsons and the one of the main characters in The Simpsons for a long time was Abu and he um, worked in the liquor store and it'd be a running joke to like make fun of the way he talked and stuff. And a lot of the people in the US kind of got trained into that mentality. And that's how they think about like a lot of Indians without recognizing that a lot of our working professionals are Indians. And if you go to places, um, depends on where you go. I understand that if you go like to Seattle, where it's more, you're more likely to see an Indian that's a doctor or that works for for Microsoft or works for a big company and they're an executive or a CEO. People will have a different perspective, but your average American doesn't think that way, and your average American may not think of them as being the doctors, and they don't understand Indian culture. Um, it's funny. So on one side, they'll think of them as like the guy that works at the liquor store. Then there's another side that will think of them as the guru and like this wise person, and will have like reverence to Indian culture, but they won't understand it because they'll think like, oh, like they're all wise and pious and peaceful. And they're like, oh, if you think Indians are peaceful, then you don't know Indian history and you don't know like you've never watched anything from Bollywood. When I lived in China, Indian movies are big in China, and they're played on TV a lot. And I would like there'd be a lot of like the epics and the movies from Bollywood would be people fighting and people being super tough and super violent. And I was like, oh, like these are not just peaceful like walk all over us people. They are very strong and very resilient. Um, but that's not how it's typically seen in the U.S. People think about like yoga in India and quiet and reserved. Because we're so bombastic in the US and we are very outspoken at times and we're very loud, we tend to think of people that are reserved and being quiet as weak. So, and I, like, for instance, most Americans probably can't tell you that, like, Sikhs um, are carry weapons. So they might walk. A guy could walk into a liquor store and be disrespectful to a Sikh and not realize, hey, that guy. There's a good chance that guy's got a pretty substantial knife on him, and he's being very nice to you instead of hurting you. But very, very capable of hurting you. But because and there's a side too where, you know, if you are operating a business in the US and you deal with law enforcement and you deal with the general public, you may tend to be more reserved because you know that it's not the best to fight with everyone. So people will think that, oh, this guy's a pushover, and it's just not true. So it's very complicated, and how you see people from different cultures interact in the US will give you a misconception about who those people really are. You know, because they're trying to fit in, they're trying to exist in a society as what's safest and works best for them, and that's not necessarily true to um, who you are. Like when I travel in China, the likelihood of me getting in a fight with a Chinese person over disrespect is pretty much zero. Because if I get in a fight in China, I can go to jail for the rest of my life. I might disappear if I'm in China. If I'm in the U.S., um, you know, I don't allow people to be disrespectful to me, and because I'm in my own home, I'm in my own culture. I know what my rights are. I know what I can do to protect myself. But in China, it's a very different, you know, different set of standards. So you can't just, you know, get into a fight and expect the same sort of protections that you do in the US. So you act differently there. So someone that might see me there might think, oh, he's not going to fight, or he's not a fighter, but they just never pushed me to the limit where I thought it was worth fighting, and they've never seen me in my own culture. Care to guess which country has the most discrimination in its borders? Oh man, that's really hard because discrimination comes in all shapes and sizes. Um, I would. It's really hard because I don't know. I know people lie. I know China's got a lot of discrimination. I know India discriminates with its own people because you guys had a caste system. Um, so yeah, I the funny this funniest thing about the U.S. too is that we're completely oblivious to the fact that Indians that come to the U.S. generally are also from the same levels. Most Indians that come to the U.S. are from the upper echelons of the old caste system, and that they, a lot of Indians that come here, if they are from the lower classes, we don't see it, but there's in the U.S., Indians discriminate against other Indians too. There have been cases where an Indian from a lower caste system or the lower levels of the caste will be refused a job by somebody from India that's got part of the upper class, and that happens, but we don't know about it. In California, they tried to pass a law because it's so bad here. Indians tried to get a law passed that you couldn't discriminate based off of caste. Many Indians, around 99% of those who move to the U.S., come from the upper castes who historically started discrimination. Yeah, well, it's like Kamala Harris is from the upper class, you know, and a lot of people don't realize that. They don't think about it. So it's funny. It's an interesting twist when Kamala Harris talks about discrimination when and talks about historical discrimination, but you don't really hear her talk about her family's part in that, you know, because most Americans don't know and most Americans don't think of it. So when someone comes to the US and they're from another country, we automatically will think like, oh, well, uh, they were never part of a bad part of society. They never discriminated. But yeah, like Kamala Harris is, you know, as it becomes popular in the U.S. to blame families for historical wrongdoings, she would catch a lot of that. But people don't know that or understand that, and it's not talked about. So her Indian side is greatly ignored for that reason because it would be uncomfortable for her to have to explain that side of the reality to other Americans. But Americans just don't understand that. You know, we tend to be very ignorant of other cultures and what things mean. So I don't know what Rishi Sunak means off the. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. Yeah, I don't. You know, what's funny is I know I haven't done a lot of reading about the about him, or you know, we. It's very interesting getting into other countries' politics and deciphering like what's going on. So uh, I think that, and that's the side. I got to go, but I think that's the side that we have to, um, as all of us in this world, need to strive to a greater understanding of our own ignorance and not be so quick to make judgments on other people and not be so quick in making decisions about other groups of people and who these people are and recognizing the diversity in an individual. And I just don't, we tend to rush, and I don't know about Indian society, but in the US, we tend to rush to snap judgments so fast and to assume that we know something about a group of people when we're very ignorant and we don't like to admit our ignorance. We do and we don't. Like Americans all the time will talk about ignorance, but they won't really address it in themselves, you know. And it's thank you. Rigger says you have an amazing perspective, and it's great to listen to you, my man. Well, thank you very much. I think traveling outside of your own country helps with that. When you get out of the USA and you live with another group of people and you recognize the humanity in all of us and the similarities in who we are as people, it helps. If you only ever stay in one spot, you kind of get mystified about other people, and that being mystified drives that level of ignorance. You know. So, but thank you very much. Appreciate hanging out, man. Have a good day and good weekend. Almost the weekend. God bless you.